For those who don't know, LAFD stands for Los Angeles Fire Department. FFPM stands for Firefighter Paramedic. So I'm going to read to you my Vietnam moment, as I like to call it. Eric and I were working New Year's Eve, and all hell was about to break loose. We got the call for an assault. Engine 61 was sent to assist. The call was given to us 8 minutes prior to midnight. As we approached, Eric had me shut down the lights and siren about a mile away. As we approached the center hallway apartment, a patrol car arrived with all of their lights turned down as well. What did you get this call as? We got it as an assault. Well, so did we. We walked into the apartment, and past the staircase, we stumbled into a hallway. At the end of this hallway was a door that led to the parking area outside. Halfway down the apartment was a body lying face down. As we got past the stairwell, gunfire erupted at the exit door. I looked at the 30-year-old and noticed a pool of blood forming at the head. The problem was that we couldn't get to him because we were pinned down by gunfire. I looked at the cops who had hit the deck like we had. I asked, "Why don't you return fire?" Their answer, "Are you out of your mind? He has more firepower than we have. He'll overrun us if we piss him off." Eric got on the radio. "Engine 61, come in non-emergency. We are taking fire." They never heard us. They got shot at coming in. The captain walked into the apartment and saw us. "Hey, on the way in, we were taking fire." No sooner had he said it that when we had to hit the deck. As soon as the fire seemed to have died down, a firefighter and I grabbed the victim by the hands and dragged him out to our ambulance. Our stretcher had been placed near their apartment, but we weren't waiting to place the patient on it. We threw him onto the floor of the ambulance. I remember the firefighter driving didn't wait for us to close the rear doors. He just hauled ass out of there. We drove for 2 blocks with the doors open. We got to the Cedars-Sinai emergency room, and I got on the radio. OCD, which would be our dispatch. From Rescue 26, we need to be conditionally available, meaning that we can't sit there and respond to calls. Negative, Rescue 26. I responded back, OCD, we can respond with brain matter all over the back of my ambulance. Silence. OCD comes back, Rescue 26, just let us know when you're available. Every child dreams of not disappointing their parents. And when I was about 13 years old, we used to gather around the television on Saturday nights on NBC at about 9 o'clock. There was a show called Emergency. And my dad loved that show. And as I'm growing up trying to please my dad, he looked at me while watching the show. He says, "If you're going to be like somebody, you be like those 2 guys." So I got hooked. And I wanted to please my father. And so then, from age 13 on, it became I was inspired to try to become a firefighter and a paramedic, just like what was on the show. I worked for the private ambulances in 1979, and I went through paramedic school on my own. And on December 9th of 1984, I got hired by the Los Angeles Fire Department. And I have some in the audience who I've worked with, and I'm very honored that you're here. And I remember just showing up at the fire station the very first time. It's been a long ways. So what I'm going to do when I do retire in about 5 or 6 years, if my body still holds up, I'm going to have my induction date, December 9th. Then I'm going to tattoo my retirement date, and I'm going to put "I survived the LAFD." Now, some of the assignments that I've had, I came on the fire department when the AIDS epidemic started and when the drug wars, especially down South Central Los Angeles, were occurring. So I was down there for about 8 years, and I remember my first day showing up, I showed up in my own personal bulletproof vest. They weren't issuing any, and in fact I slept in mine. Reason being is sometimes the door would buzz, and if you would go to answer the door, you didn't want to be greeted with a shotgun blast. The station 46s, Vernon and Hoover, where I was assigned to, they had a bus bench across the street. And on more than one occasion, I'd be wiping the ambulance down, making it nice and clean. A car would tear around the corner. Here's 20 people at the bus bench waiting for the bus. All of a sudden, AK-47 fire would go. We'd all hit the deck. After the car screeched off, we'd stand back up, and then I would count those who didn't stand back up. And they'd drag them over to the fire station. I spent quite a bit of time in the Hollywood area. In fact, that's where I am located today. I love Hollywood. Hollywood is its own city. It's a freak show. It's very interesting, and it's a lot of fun. You can't make this stuff up. Let me describe some of the paramedic training. Paramedic training, when I went through, was 5 months. And so for 2 months, you're taking a test every day in a classroom setting. And you cannot fail more than 3 tests in those 2 months. So it's very high pressure. Then for a month, you are in a hospital setting where they wheel a patient up to you, nice lighting, patient's waist high. You can start the IV, no problem. You can ask questions. And then while you're doing that training, you go to specialized area, labor and delivery. And in the 8 hours of labor and delivery that I was training in, I delivered 9 babies. So that's how that training is. And then for 2 months after that, you are sent out to the wolves. They give you 2 paramedics, which you are under their guidance. They're not going to let you kill anybody, but then it becomes on-the-job training. Firefighter training is a different animal altogether. For 12 hours a day, for about 3 months, this is how it is. The days, they switch. One day is ladder day, the next day is hose day. So for 12 hours, you go up to your ladders with your gear on, you pick up the ladder, put it against the building, stand at attention, that's high. Take the ladder, bring it back down. 12 hours straight. Hose day, go up to the fire apparatus, take the hose, run to your objective, turn on the water, turn off the water, put it at your feet, stand at attention, that's high. And what they're doing is they're basically teaching you to become task-oriented. A lot of people ask, aren't you afraid when you go into those buildings? Yeah, we're all afraid, except we become so task-oriented, we don't think about it. Because if we don't do our job, we got our fellow firefighters to contend with, and that's more scarier than the flames itself. You greet people into this world and you see many out. After 50 baby deliveries, I stopped counting. In fact, what's real funny about baby deliveries is I would deliver a baby in the back of the ambulance and somebody would sit there and go, "What's your name?" Or the lady who I just delivered her baby. "What's your name?" "Max." We get to the hospital. I'm over listening to the nurse, "So what's your baby's name?" "Oh, Max," because he delivered it. So what I started doing was I would give my partner's name. And so there's a lot of Brians walking around. We have seen many out, and many times we are the last person that person sees as regards his existence. And so it means to me, it's kind of an honor, yet it's very sad. But the thing that you have to think about is your words is the last thing that person hears before they expire. So that's very important. Partners, some I've loved, some I've hated. There's a movie that Treat Williams was in, Prince of the City. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And he talks about partnership. And that's the one unique thing about being on an ambulance, is you do everything with that partner. You confide in that partner things you wouldn't tell your wife. Treat Williams said, "I sleep with my wife, but I live with my partner." And that's how it is out in the field. Pretty soon you both are on the same wavelength. You don't even talk to each other, especially on the messy call. The messier the call is, the more quiet you become. That's how you start thinking with each other. Women on the job. I like women on the job. No, it's very political. They came on back in the 80s, or maybe the late 70s, and they've done the job well. We now have chiefs who are women. 3 of my partners have been women, and they have been the 3 best partners I've ever had. As with any group, you're going to have those in the group who aren't going to do a good job. So you don't base it on race or sex or what they believe in. I like to think of my partners or those who I work with is on how they react to people. The unique thing about this job is what they don't train you for. And what they don't train you for is what you see out there. And the one thing that starts eating at you is you try to make sense at what people do to each other. Some of the assaults, some of the stabbings, some of the shootings. I'll give you one example. I had one lady who, I walked into the door, and 65's first in, and what had happened was she's laying on the floor and her neck has been severed. Well, what had happened was her boyfriend had just finished doing his 10 years stint in jail because he assaulted her 10 years before. Well, what ended up happening was it was on his mind the entire time while he was in jail. And when he came out of prison, he was going to finish up the job. So what he had done was after he beat her ruthlessly, he went into a trash can, took the lid off of a can, and proceeded to try to sever her head off. So those are the things that stick with you. And there's not enough drugs, alcohol, or therapy that'll ever wash that stuff away. Some of the famous incidents I've been involved in was the library fire. Frank was there, remember that? The Northridge earthquake. I was at the Northridge Meadows apartment where it collapsed. And at first they didn't think it was a 3-story building, they only thought it was 2. And my job was body recovery. I was at the North Hollywood shooting. I was the second wave, in which I was very scared. That's the first time I looked at my partner and said, I am scared to go to this. As you're seeing all the helicopters, and we were listening on the radio as the call started. The Griffith Park fire that occurred back in about 2007, I was there. I was the second alarm of the Universal Studios fire, and that was about 6 hours of just fighting fire non-stop. In this job, you're exposed to many cultures, and each region of the city has their different cultures. And depending what you do as you walk in that house, you have to take that culture into consideration so you don't insult them. Because if you insult them, then you got to deal with complaints. There's no reason to insult them anyway. Give you a fine example. In Hollywood, the west side is Russian community, the east side's the Armenian. You don't ask an Armenian if he's Russian, and you don't ask a Russian if he's Armenian. Okay? The politics on this job are insane. I guarantee you, all of us got on this job to run calls and do what we see on the TV. However, then you got to deal with the administration, then you got to deal with council members, and you got to deal with the news media. So you got to watch everything that you do. It takes a special person to answer this calling, and it's not like the movies. People do not join the fire department because their dad got killed in a fire, like that movie Backdraft. That is not the reason why. A lot of us, and quite a bit, I'm quite sure that a lot of you have seen an accident or something on the freeway, and you're just bending your head. You want to be a looky-loo so bad. Well, a lot of us go beyond that because we want to be in the middle of it. Either you adapt and you become professional, or you allow the job to make you a horrible monster. And I'll give you an example of that. I worked with a kid, and it was his first month on the job, and it was funny to watch him. Everything was, yes ma'am, yes sir, what can we do for you? Anything you want, as the people were cussing him out. A year later, I worked an overtime shift with that same person, and what ended up happening was he walked in the house, he was rude to everybody, he was very verbally abusive and so forth. So you could see how this job changes you. My feelings on death. Randy Newman has a very good song, and the line goes, when you lay upon the table, you better keep your business clean. And that reminds me of death. It's neither glorious nor it's glamorous. And the sad thing is, we as the fire department, paramedics, police officers, we now know intimately what death is. And with me, I think about it now. I think about, how am I going to pass away from this earth? You're going to find when you read the book that the book's a little on the profane side in the beginning. I did that because, well, number one, my father said to always be like the firefighters, be like policemen, or be like the soldiers. Well, they all cuss people under the table. So in the very beginning, it's a little bit like that. I'll describe some of the funny calls I've been on. We get called 911. Go to this woman's house, and as we're pulling up in front of the house, the Federal Express truck is leaving. So what is this? We get the call, it's an 80-year-old woman. So we see all these boxes unopened. So I make my way into the house, and here's this lady, and she's sitting there. Telephone in hand, credit card, and on the TV's the Home Shopping Network. She's making more phone calls. And here are all these boxes throughout the house. So what did you call us up for, ma'am? She goes, I'm having problems putting this package together. So you either let that upset you or you go with it. And the way I went with it was, I said, well, what do you have there? She goes, a VCR. So I pull it out of the package, and it was one of those old cameras that used to lean on your shoulder. And my partner's like, what are you doing? I go, we're going to have some fun. So I went and took one of her tapes, I put the whole thing together, and I made a documentary the whole time. And you do that so that you don't take your anger out on the patient. We could have easily been upset with her and say, why did you call us up for this garbage? Or you take that lemon, you make lemonade out of it. Another funny call that I went on was a young man, and we get the call, abdominal pain. So we pull up, what's wrong? He's got a bucket of chicken in his hand, and he's eating it. He goes, I got a stomach ache. And I'm thinking, do you think maybe the chicken you're eating is causing you the stomach ache? And he goes, yeah, but I'm hungry. Okay, climb in. He goes, but I got my orange soda. Take that with you too. So we get to the hospital, what's wrong? Ask him. He's eating his chicken. I got a stomach ache. Nurse gives me the dirtiest look. I hope that this book allows the reader to see that we're normal people doing an abnormal job. Our divorce rate is extremely high on our job. Yes, there is substance abuse, and what I was told by our Relief Association, that they're also now having a problem with gambling. So it's not that they're bad people, it's that some are handling the stresses of this particular job differently than they should. This job makes it so that it becomes hard to relate to other people, this normal civilian population. Like I said, there's not enough drugs, therapy, or alcohol to assist me, and that's why my doctor, Ann Britt's here, and she's helped me out quite a bit. This job has changed me how I've looked at things. I'm able to separate BS from what really goes on, contrary to what the media puts out. I know I'm in therapy for life. I know I'll never be the same, but that's okay. I'm glad I did it. And why did I write this book? Because as I was on this job, everybody always talks about writing a book. And I didn't want to wait until I retired to write that book. I wanted to write the book now. And then I decided, okay, let's put the book out there. Let's see what type of fire that's going to cause. So far, nothing, fingers crossed. And that's basically it. I had written this book, manuscript form. Took it to an agent, he loved it. Big time agent out in Los Angeles. Immediately took it, signed paperwork after he read it. He shopped it to the big companies. It looked like I was going to possibly get a contract. Didn't happen. So he sends me back all the emails from these big companies. They didn't want to touch the book. So he calls me in the office and he goes, you've got something there. You've got a book that people are going to want to read. So he says, have you thought of self-publishing? And I went to createspace.com. They're a company from Amazon. And yeah, you pay the one thing that people don't realize is you don't make money off of writing books. You know, but if you're creative and you want to get something out there, which I did, that's the route I went. This has been as we discussed, Mr. Thornton and I, this has been a learning experience. we are so fortunate that we have Vromans here because they're allowing us to do this book signing. They really encourage local authors. And it's like I would come to these book signings and I would see that they'd have a poster. Okay, that's what I need to get, so I made that poster. I'd see people with postcards, so I'd go to a printing press. Can you make a postcard for me? Made some business cards. By the way, I'm not at work right now because I just had shoulder surgery. I'm still going to therapy for that. I got bored at my house, and I was going to pay somebody some money to do a website. And I said, you know, let me get a crack at it. Now I got a website. So it's been a real learning experience. Once again, if you got a message that you want to put out there and you really believe in it, do it. Because now when I go to expire, I'll be able to say, I wrote a book. Me and my partner were in Hollywood and we were grumbling about everything. As what you do in the ambulance, you just complain about everything. But that's where you want to complain. So he tells me, he goes, you know, Max, we're the outside dogs. I go, can you elaborate? In our fire department, we have what we call the inside dogs and the outside dogs. He goes, this is what I mean. He goes, how many of you got dogs? He says, what does a master with an inside dog have? He has the little dog that gets to sleep by the fireplace, gets fed, gets petted, can't do anything wrong. Oh, you did a little poo-poo on the rug, we'll clean it up. Not a problem. Then you got the outside dogs. And what the outside dog is, that's the dog that, yeah, it's cold outside, but he can deal with it. He's got a dog house. Time to eat. Here, have some food. Don't make a mess. Here's your bowl of water that's been sitting there for 4 days, if you remember to fill it up. And we as paramedics would say, well, we were the outside dogs. And our department was going through a situation where they were taking paramedics and training them to be firefighters and firefighters to be paramedics. So now we're all dual function. And it's funny because there used to be this rift amongst the paramedics and the firefighters, real bad. I always tried to avoid that, you know, because of guys like you and Don Dodd, Mr. Hood. It was a pleasant experience for me. But now, mind you, you got that inside dog. And every so often, that little inside dog wants to go out because he sees the guys outside, the outside dogs. The dogs are the paramedics. So every so often, one of those firefighters say, hey, well, I want to go to paramedic school. Those guys seem like we're having a good time. So the owner opens the door and out he goes. There goes the dog. Well, after he's out there for a while, being out on the ambulance, running ridiculous calls, he goes, I don't like this. I want to go back in. Owner opens the door and gives him a smack. You're an outside dog now. So that's how we came up. We're all outside dogs. And we tell that inside dog, come over with us, we'll take care of you, we'll show you how to survive. And that's how we came up with that. Any other questions?
Any ramifications from the department
coming
up?
Not yet. Yeah. I'm hearing rumors about things. And
would you counter that with your First Amendment rights?
Yes, and the other way that I was able to account it, because I did take it to a lawyer prior, and he says, everything you described, you happen to be there. So he goes, you were there, so you're writing down your observations.
Well, that's how your book reads. You're telling a story. We're sitting down talking to you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much, folks. Thank you for listening.